a little bit of a race switch. Because his orc might actually be stronger. We'll see if he decides to change that in the future. Yeah, AKM and Hurricane, you know, bit of a rough go for them, but they did take quite a few maps. You know, we see them with 7 points at the end. Raven as well. I think he forfeited a couple of his matches at the end, or at least one of them. So a bit of a low score, but his MMR was actually decent. He was one of the ones I thought could have maybe even replaced like Inspired up here, for instance. Looking at it, probably Last Envoy and Inspired could have been switched, and maybe that would have been pretty balanced. Not sure. But overall, I think this group functioned pretty well. Lucker did have a rough time though, but I don't think Lucker. I don't think Lucker was without opportunity to win some of these games, but it was definitely tough for him. Would have been nice to see him do better, but yeah. In the end, these are our 4 moving on to the playoffs, and the bracket will look like this. We have the Last Envoy against Ember, and 6 Bones versus Bump Time. I believe it will be, I think Last Envoy is actually Undead. I think it's Undead Mirror, and then Human versus Night Elf. Interesting bracket. See how they do. And then moving on. So Group E. Group E. We actually had Eugene kind of crushing it. He did drop 1 map right at the end to the 2nd seed, up, but did still win the series. Looking at it, you know, afterwards, it's possible Eugene and Lucker could have been switched. Maybe that would have been more balanced. But, you know, it looks like up also was pretty strong in this group. It is tough to say. Up did drop a few maps to people though as well. But as it stands, Eugene takes the top of the group, up second. And then Juantu. I think Juantu, one of the bigger surprises of this group. Not to say he's bad or anything, but you know, I think when you initially look at this group, yeah, some of these players are pretty difficult. You know, you got Frozen Yeti, who's consistently been 50, 100 or so MMR higher than Juantu. You got Eugene like 100 MMR higher. Up showed he's pretty strong. You got Etaf Raven, who's usually 50 to 100 MMR higher than Juantu. But Juantu, taking some maps in the series he lost and winning quite a few series, sneaks into that 3rd spot. And then Frozen Yeti makes it into the 4th slot. Etaf Raven, who got into 5th seed, so not actually making the playoffs, I think is one of the ones probably most expected that didn't make the playoffs in this group to have been able to. But maybe he just had some rough matchups. I do think he actually beat Juantu, even though Elf's typically been one of his worst matchups. But not making it. Kukshu, I don't know exactly how to pronounce his name, but I think he dropped forfeit a couple matches at the end. Awok had the rough time. Shulks and Tang Halu played a couple matches, but in the end weren't able to keep up with the schedule and forfeited. And that was Group E. Group F, we have Soulful at the top, and Soulful is one of the players I haven't really heard of myself, but he had a good showing He definitely dropped a few maps. You can see, I think one of the easiest ways to tell is by the point differential. The fact that he has 15 points but only 11 differential means he did drop quite a few maps, but in the end, winning most of his series. Moon Endino sneaks in at the 2nd seed at the end, winning the tiebreaker over our 3rd seed, Master EC. Master EC, also a player I hadn't really heard of, but he had a good showing here. He had a close series, the first one I cast. I think it was Master EC versus Zizzo. It was like a 2-1, but somewhat close. And then Jedi sneaks in at the 4th seed. Jedi was actually one of the lowest MMRs of Group EF division, but showing that he can definitely stand toe-to-toe with these players, makes it into the 4th seed. And Jats gets snubbed out in the 5th seed. So close, but not able to make it into the playoffs. Dropped a couple too many games right at the end. I also think all 3 of his losses, he didn't get a map in. So all 3 of his losses were 0-2 losses. And you really need some of those points. Maybe if he lost 1-2 in some of those, he might have been able to make like 4th seed. Blademaster definitely did good in a few of his matches. He actually beat Moon Endino towards the end there. 2-0, I believe, even. And then Endo Zero having a rough time. Possibly could have fit better in the group lower. Not sure. Seek and Zizzo both dropping out. Seek wasn't able to keep up with the schedule, and Zizzo, I think Zizzo just had some problems with like hosting, scheduling, and all this type of stuff. Maybe some language barriers. But it was cool to see him play a few, because he did play a couple before forfeiting, and he didn't look like a bad player at all. So would be nice to see him potentially try again. In this group, the playoffs look like this. We have Eugene against Jedi. And that is actually a rough match for Eugene, I feel. Like, it's surprising with Jedi being one of the lower MMRs of the 2 groups, and Eugene being like the highest MMR plus crushing his group. But Jedi has historically in the past actually done pretty decent against Eugene. So that will be a very interesting matchup to see if the actual #1 seed potentially even falls 1st round. The next matchup, Juantu versus Moon Endino. We have a bit of an elf mirror here. I'm not exactly sure how they stand up to each other, what sort of playstyles they will play against each other. I'm expecting Demon Hunter play, but you never know. Elves like to mix it up every now and then. Up versus Master EC. That can be a pretty tough matchup, I think. Up has been showing to do pretty good, but I think Master EC has also been looking pretty strong. A strong Night Elf player. See how it goes. And then Frozen Yeti. Many of you probably know him. He snuck in there as the 3rd seed of Group F, and he's going to be, or no, the 4th seed of, wait, if I have this right, the 4th seed of Group E, and he will be facing the big #1 seed of Group F, Soulful. So potentially a tough matchup for him. We did see Soulful take a 2-1 victory over the Night Elf Moon Endino, for instance, right here at the last week. But maybe Frozen Yeti will be able to check those replays, see what he can capitalize on, and try to take that in his own favor. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this bracket progresses. This was the other division, EF. similar to how groups B and C were combined. Moving on though, we got Group G. Group G, still another 9-person group. And Young Hoffer, honestly, kind of coming out of nowhere and kind of smashing. He did pretty solid. I believe his MMR is like 1600 or even just below 1600. So it doesn't look that crazy comparatively to what we've seen some of these players' MMRs jump to. I think like Belit and Jonathan have been, 1650. Jonathan's probably even been near 1700 before. But Young Hoffer, strong showing, takes the top seed in this group. Haster coming in at second at the end there. And then third, fourth, fifth, very close between Troa, Belit, and Jonathan. Jonathan had suffered a loss to Romstar, but Rom had finished like half his matches already. So his final 4 matches that got forfeit at the end, we had left the previous results in. It's kind of, unfair to completely erase previous results when like half the matches are played and it's like final week and stuff. So Jonathan narrowly missing out on the top 4, but Belit is actually going to be away for quite a duration of the playoffs and has opted to let Jonathan take his spot. So Jonathan will be our 4th seed in this group. DQQXMY was also cool to see. He came in as a substitute and did pretty solid. Psych did alright as well. Dragonborn also a substitute. Sadly, we placed Dragonborn in this group because this is where we had a substitute spot open. But later in the season, we found out another player in the group below dropped. Could have been possible to put Dragonborn there. Maybe he would have had better matchups there rather than this group, because this group showed to be a little tough for him. But, maybe next season, if he's signed up in time, for instance, he can be placed in the better group, a more appropriate group to begin with. But yeah, for this group, our playoffs are looking like this. We have Young Hoffer versus the replacement for Belit. It is Jonathan. And I believe Jonathan actually won 2-1 in their series during the season, so could be a pretty close match. And then the other matchup, Haster versus Troa, which also could be a pretty cool matchup. I believe we have one of each race here, right? I think it's human, orc, elf, undead, if I'm getting that right. So that's kind of cool to see. All 4 races. I'm pretty sure that's what they all play, but I could be wrong. But yeah, will be interesting to see how this group progresses. It is similar to Group D, just a 4-person bracket, so just semifinals and finals. But as we move to these bottom 4 groups, these are 10-person groups, and they will have 6-person brackets. In Group H, we have Old Greg taking the top seed. He did really strong. He did lose a series, but he lost it 1-2, so he still got a point for it. Now, saying this, if you look at his point differential though, he actually lost quite a lot of maps, but he always won the series pretty much, right? So definitely could see things change in the playoffs potentially. Maybe instead of winning 2-1, he'll lose 1-2, for instance, and we could see him taking over, but he has been showing strong so far. Same with Gable coming in at the 2nd seed. Point differential actually in favor of Gable comparatively, but 1 less point. He didn't take a map in his loss, but most of his wins were 2-0 wins rather than 2-1 wins. And then the next 4, a lot closer. All their points, their point differentials, their records 5 and 4 on all of them. The next 4 pretty close overall. We got N. Williams, Ning Ziyun, the Grinchy, and Colorado 16. And it'll be very interesting to see how their bracket progresses. Sauce, bit of a rough showing. You know, he did take some maps. Magi as well had a rough time. And then Hitka with a couple forfeits at the end. But I do think Hitka did okay when he was playing. Stop click, rough showing at the start and then forfeited after. Kind of went MIA. This is where we would have probably liked to place Dragonborn instead if we knew stop click was dropping, but we didn't know until too late. But yeah, this group, the playoff bracket, going to look like this. We got Old Greg and Gable getting a bye in the first round. And Grinchy versus Ning Ziyun. N. Williams versus Colorado 16. N. Williams looking good with his 3rd seed, but I think he got one of his least favorite matchups he could have got against Colorado 16. It is going to be human versus undead. So that could be a pretty close one and could be a rough time for N. Williams. Not sure yet. And then Grinchy versus Ning Ziyun. I think Grinchy won 2-0 in the season. However, I believe they might have played... I'm not sure. Maybe they played before and Ning Ziyun won. I'm not sure. But it should be a cool matchup. I think they're probably going to be playing Elf versus Human and then Human versus Undead for those 2 matches. Yeah, we'll see how it progresses. N. Williams definitely, I think, would have preferred facing Grinchy or Ning Ziyun because he likes the probably facing Elf or Human Mirror much better than facing Undead, but that did not work out for him. He will be against Colorado. We'll see how he can do though. And I believe that matchup is actually coming up here pretty soon. They're scheduled to play pretty early. Possibly our first playoff match of the season even. Moving on though, Group I. This group looked like Barlin and Blademaster Rush were kind of taking off at the top of the bracket. But in the last week or 2 of the season, we started to see some forfeits. You know, people weren't able to keep up with their schedule. And in the end, it is actually Fila Mindbender sitting at the top of the group after those forfeits. So he is going, since this is a 10-person group, 6-person playoff, Fila Mindbender snagging one of those bye weeks in the first round alongside Barlin. Blademaster Rush is actually dropping out from the playoffs. He's going to be a bit busy, not going to be able to keep up the next couple weeks. And like I said, he was one of those players who did miss a few of his matches in the last couple weeks as well. Barlin also missed a few matches. Otherwise, he likely could have been the 1st seed. But it is not the case. Does still make it in a 2nd. And then we got Burrow Rush. Burrow Rush will be the 3rd seed with Blademaster Rush gone. Just over Floss, our 4th seed. Wigan, 5th seed. And Cake Pie makes it in at the 6th seed. Cake Pie Biscuit probably not expecting to make playoffs, but does just in the end make it. I think main event had a real chance to make playoffs. However, as you can see, he had like 3 forfeits at the end of the season with matches not completed. So a lot of missed points, some minus points. Otherwise, maybe main event could have been here in the playoffs as well. It sucks to see, but only so much we can do. Keeping up with the schedule. Got to make sure we progress the season, move on to the playoffs. And our playoff bracket will be looking like this. Fila and Barlin with the bye. And Wigan versus Floss 2 times daily. And Burrow Rush versus Cake Pie Biscuit. I think Burrow Rush versus Cake Pie was actually a 2-1 for Burrow Rush in the season. So still a close matchup. Even though Cake Pie Biscuit barely made it in, still has a real chance here. Could take out Burrow Rush. And then Floss 2 times daily versus Wigan should hopefully also be another close match. And we'll see how those winners do against the favorites moving on. And now for our final group in the Fountain of Manor League. It is Group J. And this group did pretty good at keeping up with their matches overall. Towards the end of the season, a little less so. I think Tori dropped a few of her series at the end. Tonk Tanks kind of went MIA, so we had to forfeit his matches. But otherwise, a very interesting group. It was cool to see it progress. And we actually have Mr. Bounce at the top seed. Beh, our undead player. I've heard of some of these players like Soft Ice Cream, Habitant, Fourth Age, Tori, recently Alter Ego and Buzzkill because they're elves. I've heard of them. But I actually haven't heard of Beh. I don't think I knew much about Mr. Bounce either, and they ended up both doing pretty good in the group. Number 1 and number 2 seed. They will be getting the bye in this group. But it was really close. 17 points, 16, 15, 14. Very well could have gone a different direction if 1 or 2 series played out slightly different. Yeah, Soft Ice Cream and Light nagging the 3rd and 4th seed. And then Habitant and Fourth Age coming in at the 5th and 6th seed. Yeah, a highlight of this group was actually Tori being the low MMR player of the group, but she snuck some wins in against the elves, doing some ghoul rushes, learned the classic Onyx strats, and took wins off Buzzkill, Alter Ego, and Habitant. But in the end, the rest of the group still proved to be a bit hard for her. And Alter Ego and Buzzkill had a bit of a rough time, but cool to see them play out the rest of the season, of course. And our playoff picture for this group looking like this. Mr. Bounce and Beh getting the byes. And we will have Elf versus Orc, Habitant versus Light, as well as Soft Ice Cream versus Fourth Age in the other matchup. And curious to see how this one progresses. Let's actually check. Who was Mr. Bounce's loss to in the season? He lost 1-2 to Habitant. He did drop some maps against some other players as well. But yeah, looking at the bracket, Habitant is on the same side as Mr. Bounce. So if Habitant manages to get past Light, we could see Mr. Bounce with, facing the one player he lost to during the season. But of course, Light has been doing pretty good as well with his orc style, primarily Farseer, Headhunters. And then on the other side, of course, Soft Ice Cream was looking pretty strong, but actually did not manage to reach top 1 or 2 seed as Bet ended up snagging that 2 seed over him in the end. And that is Group J. And that's pretty much our playoff preview. Other than, you know, talking more about Group A. Obviously, Group A is still a little bit of a mess, like I mentioned earlier, but we will most likely see at least of these top 5 in the playoffs. However, the seeding will change around a bit after we input the forfeit scores. And then the 6th seed, looking a bit close. If any of these players finish more of their matches or not, that could affect it. Yeah, that's currently Dirtbag is seed 1 because Hitman is currently getting 3 forfeits, so he will have like 9 points, and Dirtbag will have 12. Please would be the 2nd seed, as he would have 11 points. He only has 1 forfeit as well. You know, this group was the one group, as always, that's a bit behind. The same thing in Washed Up League. Group A, a bit slacking. But yeah, Group B and C are seeded. And yeah, that's my playoff preview.